most guys are going to hit a 225 pound bench.
Everything they just said, it's been canceled because of what he just said right now. Coach Greg, in today's video, we're going to be going over what exactly does it take to bench press 315 pounds. And not only that, how hard is it to deadlift 405? What's easier? What's harder? How much work does it take? How long is it going to take you to bench press 315?
So my question was, how realistic of a goal is benching 315? I know I'm not going to squat 800 pounds. I'm just, unless I'm on special supplements.
Sure.
Yeah, as if you could just take special supplements and suddenly you can squat 800 pounds. It's not going to work like that.
But is a 315 bench for like the average person, where is that in like the realistic scale?
And so let me give you my answer to this. For most people, it's not realistic. I'm sorry, but for most people, the average person with average genetics, they're not likely going to bench press 315 pounds. Of course, some of you can, but those of you who can most likely have above average genetics.
Most people do not train consistently. And
Right.
even when they think they're training consistently, they're not training consistently.
And so let's get this out of the way. Most people are not going to train perfectly, and so their likelihood of bench pressing 315 are going to be lower than if they did in fact train effectively. But even if they did, unless you have above average genetics, you're not benching 315. I know a number of people, coaches, guys with exercise physiology degrees. They are training people harder than last time. They've been at it for years, even on steroids. Can't bench 315. Now, on the other hand, if you're 6 foot tall and you were 200 pounds in grade 10, chances are you're probably benching 315. But those people have above average genetics.
But I do think that a 200 pound male
Yeah.
is capable of 315 pound bench press.
The average person is going to be far lighter than 200 pounds. Imagine, the average person is about 5'9" tall. Do you really think the average guy walking around that goes to the gym is 5'9" and 200 pounds? Well, maybe if they're obese, but for the most part, 5'9" and 200, that is a freaking monster. That is a beast. If you're a lean, perhaps 15% body fat and you're 5'9" and you're 200 pounds, yeah, I bet you're benching 315. But I also bet you look incredible.
Genetics play a huge role, but it might take a long time. Like, I think the only reason that I can bench in the upper threes is because I started bench pressing when I was 14.
No, that's not the only reason. The main reason is because of your genetics. If you hadn't started training at 14 and started training at 18, do you really think you wouldn't be benching 315 because you hadn't trained from the ages of 14 to 18? If I started training at 10, do you really think if I started training at 18 that somehow my bench press would be far lower than it is right now?
I think for you, it's realistic. I think for most people, it's not because most people can't do it, but life gets in the way.
I think you should have stopped it right there. For most people, it's not realistic. And by most, it means more than 50%. If you take 100 athletes and 55 can't do it and 45 can, most are not benching 315. The majority. But he adds this caveat, because life gets in the way. I don't believe that the reason that people aren't benching 315 is because life gets in the way. Because if the reason you're not benching 315 is because life is getting in the way, I would say most of you could bench press 315. The reason you're not is because you're a bunch of wusses. You're not training hard enough. You're prioritizing other things. And so if you do want this goal, of course you can get it. But the fact remains, if you don't have above average genetics, you can train as hard as you want. You're not benching 315.
200 pounds though, like we're assuming average genetics.
Why are we assuming that a guy with average genetics weighs 200 pounds? Where did that stipulation come from? 200 pounds is enormous.
If you're a 165 pound guy
Yeah.
and you're 6'1" with really long arms,
Tough.
315 is probably not happening.
And so think of it. He's like, well, if you're 6'1" and 165 pounds with long arms, it's not happening. Well, if you're 6'1", chances are you're going to weigh closer to 200 pounds than if you're 5'1". Doesn't that make sense? And so why would we say this? If we're being inclusive, the average person has to include some guys that are 6'1", some guys that are 5'6". It's an average. And so on average, most people never benching 315.
It's realistic, but it's like, it's going to take some work.
It's going to take time.
Yeah.
Like, it's going to take time.
Like 405 is like, I don't know, buddy. You know, that might be reaching.
Yeah.
405. I literally have the world record in the bench press for guys over 40 in the 90 kilogram division. World record. My best natty bench press is 451. If you're benching 405, you are a freak.
Well, I'd say 405 is like reaching for a lot of people. So yeah, I mean 405. I would say no, it's not a good goal for folks.
405 is such a lofty goal that you may as well also say, yeah, I also want to run a 4-minute mile. Really, 405 natural for most people, it ain't happening.
The 315, which with training, discipline, proper diet, but human behavior's the issue 9 times out of 10.
9 out of 10 times your goals are too lofty. You're comparing yourself to guys that are not natural, or comparing yourself to people you see on social media. You're comparing yourself to the top 1% of the top 1%. The people you're scrolling to the left, to the right, up and down on social media. And so people began to set realistic goals and stop thinking that they're somehow special. Everyone, you're average. If you're not special, you're not benching 405, and it's not because of human behaviors.
225 is just like, hey, if you actually train for 4 to 6 months, most guys are going to hit a 225-pound bench.
Everything they just said, it's been canceled because of what he just said right now. If you say 99 things in a row that make sense, there can be one thing you say that makes me completely question your intelligence. Benching 225 is not in the bag, and especially in 4 to 6 months. And so what he's saying right now is if you join the gym within 6 months, you should expect to bench press 225. And if you didn't, well, it's probably because your behaviors got in the way. You didn't train hard enough. You skipped all your gym sessions. 225, people. Do you know how hard it is to bench press 225? Likely just as hard as he thinks it is to bench press 315. 225 for most people, a very difficult goal, going to take years to accomplish. And so do you get the point? 225 is cause for celebration. If it was so easy to do, in 4 to 6 months, everyone could do it. Do you really think there would be so many memes on how freaking crazy it is to bench press 225? How good you feel about it? There's only a few things you may remember to this extent in your life. Perhaps where you proposed to your wife, where you had sexy time for the first time. And if you haven't had sexy time for the first time, don't forget harder than last time. You know you want it. Click the link in the description, code Greg, 15% off. And if you've been training for 6 months or more, perhaps you want to take ActiBuild. I'm just kidding. Wait 6 years. You don't need this until you reach a plateau. ActiBuilder GO2 Max, build more muscle, greater endurance, greater recovery. You know you want the supplements. Code Greg, 15% off. Click the link in the description.
You hit that in last April. What, in Alpharetta was the first time?
No, it was not. It was actually at my parents' house in their gym with strength go plates, pretty sure.
Notice he remembers exactly where he hit that number. It was in his parents' house. It was this time of year, blah, blah, blah. You remember everything. 225, one of the most memorable times in your life. And it's not memorable because it was so easy. It took 4 months. It's harder than friggin' last time.
You give me a guy between 160 and 200 pounds and he's serious about training and he trains for 9 months.
Yeah, he'll hit it.
He can deadlift 405.
405 deadlift. Any guy, between 160 and 200 pounds, probably 9 months of training, he's pulling 405. I mean, that's just normal. That's just everybody can do it. You see how far-fetched these guys' ideas of strength are? And so the problem is this, it's a logical fallacy. You think that because you can do something, because it makes sense for you to do it, that others, they're going to do it just as easy. I began training at 10 years old. I have a Guinness Book World Record in the deadlift. Do you know how long it took me to deadlift 405? Want to take a guess? I was 24 years of age. My first powerlifting competition at 23, I pulled 355. That's 13 years I was at 355. And yeah, I only weighed 148, cut from 160 to make 148 to set a world record in the bench press at my first attempt, bench 341.7 pounds at 148. And so even with my genetics, certainly took more than 9 months of training to deadlift 405. And so all of you listening to this out there, consider this. People very strong just think it's easy because it was easy for them. And to the same extent, those runners in the Olympics that have track teams their entire life, they've seen people running sub 4-minute miles, probably think, yeah, anyone that trains for maybe 6 months, probably run a 5-minute mile. 6-minute mile, easy. I probably 2 months. No, so many people could have trained their entire lives, never run a 5-minute mile. Just because you can, it took you a week, doesn't mean others can do it in a whole year or entire life of training.
I would say a 315 bench is a much bigger accomplishment than a 405 deadlift.
So my opinion, 315-pound bench press, 4 or 5-pound squat, 495-pound deadlift, those about equally impressive for most people. But remember, it all comes down to your genetics, your anthropometric measurements. You have long arms, short arms, long tibia, femurs, whatever. Depending on how your body is built, how you were made, some lifts are going to be far easier than others.
Coach Braden, 600 about deadlifts me by a lot. And his bench is getting way better.
Yeah.
But he used to be super frustrated about his bench.
Well, obviously, think of it. The bigger your deadlift, oftentimes the weaker your bench. If you have very long arms, it's going to make it easier for you to deadlift. But to the opposite extent, because of those long arms, you're going to be weak in the bench. And so notice I have the world record in the bench press and a Guinness world record in the deadlift. But oh, Greg, the only reason you can bench so much is because you have T-Rex arms. And the only reason you can deadlift so much is because your arms are so long. Which is it, people? I had records in both. But the one thing I did struggle in was the squat. I had genetic disorder at my hips, was unable to train effectively, could not push harder than last time. Also, the fact I have very long torso and short legs makes me lean forward more as I squat, and it makes it much more difficult for me to perform the squat.
But you understand, hey, if I just keep training,
trust the process.
Trust the process.
And so hopefully you enjoyed my opinion on whether or not it's likely that you'll bench press 315. Remember, it all comes down to genetics. We all have different opinions. I gave you my opinion. They gave you their opinion. Have your own opinion. What do you think? Let me know in the comment section. Do you think the average person should be able to bench press 315? Do you think it's easy to bench press 225 within 6 months? And what's more impressive, a 315-pound bench press or a 495-pound deadlift? Subscribe, click the bell button, comment to boost the algorithm. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it. Perhaps watch one of those 2 bloops. Don't forget about the cookbooks and the training books, the Circle Diet book, all this going on the website. Training plans by me and my team. Also, in fact, phone consults and cameos. You can become a newsletter subscriber and get a free diet and training program all on my website. Don't forget about code Greg, gives you 15% off. And until next time, I am out.